please put it on the silent mode. And if you'd like to speak about an item on or not on the agenda, fill out a slip and bring it to this beautiful young lady to my left, and we'll get you an opportunity to have 3 minutes. With that, we can do our pledge. Lloyd, would you please? Okay, first order of business would be the minutes.
I would say that at first we should do a roll call since we do have
We'll
one
do
plan
roll
commissioner
call?
on the phone. Yep.
Okay, we're having a game here.
I can handle that, Chair Algauer. So Chair Algauer,
Here.
Vice Chair Markarian, Commissioner Beck,
Here.
Commissioner Brzee, Commissioner Hicks,
Here.
Commissioner Rexstad.
Here.
And then, as noted, Vice Chair Markarian is on the phone at the alternate location for this meeting, which is in Lebanon. So I'm sure there's a lot of interested people for Yucaipa projects there, but that's where he's at.
And to go back real quick, Commissioner Wolf, also your name was cut off on my roll call sheet. I apologize. So
Here.
Okay, with that, got to approve of the consent agenda and the minutes from the June 15th meeting. Do I hear a motion?
We have four, so that's the quorum. One of you guys make. Yeah, I make a motion that we accept the minutes of the June 15th meeting.
Thank you, Lloyd. I get a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Richard. And I will be abstaining.
As will I.
Yeah, and for all the items, we'll need to make sure we do a roll call vote, and then after this, we'll have to go back to the public comment for items not on the agenda. So Maddie, can you do the roll call for the minutes?
Chair Algauer,
Here.
abstaining.
Abstain.
Oh, I abstained, yes.
Vice Chair Markarian,
Aye.
Commissioner Beck,
Yes.
Commissioner Brzee,
Yes.
Commissioner Hicks,
Yes.
Commissioner Rexstad,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
I'll abstain.
And
So
then,
we had a motion, second. Any discussion? Seeing none, motion carries. Okay, then we move into, we have any public comments?
no public comments on items not on the agenda.
Thank you. So with that, I guess we'll just move to our first project. Case number 21-138 is a CUP, an architectural review. But right before we get started on that, I was not here at the last meeting. I did read through the complete minutes and had gone over some with Mr. Benlock as well as Mr. Wolf has. And I think we're both fairly knowledgeable as to what's going on at this point. And also disclose that I did meet with Tony Hicks, one of the commissioners, but we did not discuss the project except that because he wanted me to make sure I took a good look at the project itself. And that was the complete length of our conversation on this project. So with that,
All right, so I'm gonna do kind of a condensed presentation on this project, given that you guys have all received a presentation on this project. But before you use case number 21-138, it's conditional use permit architectural review for a 363,000 square foot tilt-up concrete warehouse and office project on approximately 19.32 acres at 7th Place and County Line Lane. As noted, this project is at that corner, kind of along north of County Line Road, on the west end of Interstate 10 in the city. The property itself is within the regional commercial land use district of the Freeway Corridor Specific Plan that had been adopted in 2008. And then the property itself is mostly vacant with 2 single-family residences on site. And as I noted, that it is within the specific plan that was adopted in 2008. The plan itself encompasses a little over 1,200 acres. Now, the specific plan has kind of a few key goals as part of it. One is to serve kind of the local and regional commercial needs, and then also to provide housing for the project or within the plan area. And then the regional commercial land use district does allow for a variety of activities, including retail, service-oriented uses, as well as warehousing and other related industrial uses. And then it does specify that all projects reviewed should be reviewed through the city's conditional use permit review process. As part of the overall specific plan, the EIR was also adopted and certified by City Council for the specific plan. And then I do also want to note, kind of surrounding the site, there is some commercial development that's under construction in the city of Calamasa. Now, just kind of as a high-level view of the project, it is, as I mentioned, 363,000 square foot tilt-up warehouse with 353,000 square feet for warehousing, 5,000 for an office, and then an additional 5,000 square feet for a mezzanine. The project itself is designed as a speculative project, so it does provide a floor plan, parking, and loading areas to accommodate a few different type of users, and so it allows the greater marketability of the site for the ultimate tenant. It is a 45-foot tall structure with 36 dock doors on it, and then provides 393 car spaces and 55 trailer spaces. Now, as part of the project review, we did do our project notice, which is in addition to our normal requirements for a public hearing notice. We did receive a few comments. One was from a property owner near the site with some concerns over noise, air traffic, and quality. These issues were addressed as part of the project level environmental review. And then we do have in the staff report excerpts of the relevant analysis to address those comments. And then the last one was with the city of Calamasa with some concerns over the capacity of County Line Road and Interstate 10, and making sure that the improvements related to the project address potential traffic-related issues of the warehouse use. And then as part of the public hearing notice, the city of Calamasa did provide additional responses. And then through our efforts, the city of Yucaipa and Calamasa staff have met a few different times to work through some of these concerns, and then had essentially developed conditions of approval that was intended to address it. Part of the project review was reviewed at the June 15th, 2022 Planning Commission hearing. As the commission is aware, a lot of the discussion really did focus on these traffic-related concerns, especially for Interstate 10 and County Line Road. And as part of the public comment, City of Calamasa had noted their concerns with the traffic impacts and really focusing on the timing of the interim improvements. So the mitigation measure to address the circulation for the project, as well as the development in Calamasa, is interim signals located at the off-ramps of Interstate 10 and County Line Road. And so really a lot of the discussion was the fair share and the implementation of these interim improvements, making sure that they're in place before the project is operational, and that the total cost of those signals be absorbed by the respective development, and working through what that fair share split should be. As part of initially the updated condition of approval that we had worked through to address the concerns, specified kind of the fair share cost element of the freeway and improvements based on the traffic studies done for this project, as well as the Calamasa commercial project at 7th Street or 7th Place as well. And then as part of the project review and the discussion at that meeting, the applicant then did agree to a 50-50 split of this cost. City of Calamasa, as part of their project comments, did request continuance of the project to further coordinate these improvements and to work through that split cost discussion. Since that meeting, City of Yucaipa and Calamasa have continued to work on this project, and ultimately the applicant has agreed to covering 75% of the cost of these interim signal improvements, with 25% to their fuel station applicant. And then I do want to note a Comment letter was received from City of Calamasa yesterday and provided that note that they are now in supportive of the project and the amended condition of approval 122, which reflects this 75-25% split. As part of the project review, additionally, some questions were presented about just kind of the view shed and whether or not you would see kind of the truck loading bays. Based on the grade elevations of the proposed site with respect to where Interstate 10 is, the applicant did provide some renderings that show kind of what the view would be. And so with the screen wall, the landscaping, and then the height elevation changes, the truck loading area would be obscured from view with the proposed project and how it's been designed. And then there was also some comments about the economic benefits of the proposed project. Applicant did talk about some of the key elements at the last meeting, but as part of the project review, they would be subject to the city's development impact fee program, and essentially would be responsible for $1.8 million contribution towards the city's development impact fee program. Additionally, the interim signals, so the construction of the traffic signals at the off-ramps of Interstate 10 would also be a project cost that they would be responsible for in addition to the city's development impact fee program. And then a few other kind of elements that I guess is worth noting. One is as part of the property tax element will change with how the property is currently assessed with the development of the property. As a note, the freeway corridor specific plan area represents about a little over 7% of the city's land mass. However, it does represent actually less than 1% of the assessed value of the city. So right now, it's a lot of land that doesn't generate much revenue for the city at all. And so that will change with the development proposed within the freeway corridor specific plan as consistent with that plan. Secondly is kind of the sales tax. Do want to note that as a speculative project, the exact numbers and figures aren't known. It will vary based on the tenant and business. However, some other cities that have developed warehouse projects have actually seen a 3- to 4-fold increase in their per capita sales tax revenue with such a warehouse type project. Certainly it varies depending on whether or not it's a point of sale type location or not, but that is worth knowing. And then the last part that they identified is kind of the indirect benefits as well. So salary of employees, hiring, including the local workforce, since we do have more of a bedroom community. The employees that would be then buying lunch and other stuff, locally buying gas as they're commuting. And then also the last part is the daytime activity. One of the things that, as part of the market analysis that, let's say, restaurants and other retailers look at is how many people are in the city during the day. And that's certainly something as a bedroom community that we don't compete as well as other communities that have a little bit more of a job force within the community. So that's something else that's worth noting. As part of the economic benefits, it really is more of a focus of the city council purview rather than plan commission, but because of the topics that were presented at the June 15th meeting, we just wanted to provide a high-level discussion on that. The last part I did want to discuss was a project comment letter that was received this afternoon from Mitchell Sy, attorney at law, with some comments about it. Really, the comment letter notes that they represent the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, a labor union group. And really their focus is encouraging projects and cities to encourage union labor for projects and hiring locally and some of the air quality benefits that may result from that. I do want to note that as part of the project, there are conditions of approval that for any commercial project in the city that developers try to look at Yucaipa businesses and try to hire locally or at least provide opportunities for those businesses and contractors to bid on projects. And then as part of the air quality impacts, it's certainly helpful to note. However, as part of the environmental review that was done for the project, it is in conformance with all appropriate thresholds from the air quality regional board. And so the project itself doesn't result in significant impacts on that. So it certainly is helpful information, but the project itself is within the requirements under CEQA. And so with that, staff does recommend approval of the project. I am happy to answer any questions. I do have in the PowerPoint slide all the other slides that were included for the June 15th meeting, but given the past discussions and the continuance, I don't want to spend too much time on stuff that everyone's already heard. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant and their team is also here.
Okay, before we get to applicant, anyone like to ask staff any questions at this time?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this
Okay,
is
then.
Chris Markarian on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I need,
I just wanted to make sure, Ben, so the purpose of the continuance of the last meeting of June 15th on this item was for you and the city of Yucaipa and the team to get together and decide that fair share split of the cost, which I heard is now 75% on the applicant and 25% on the gas station?
Yes, that is correct. So the continuance was to help give additional time for the city of Yucaipa staff to work with Cal Mesa staff and address some of the concerns that they had, at least in terms of the implementation of that interim signal. And that has been completed, and the city of Cal Mesa did provide an email response on July 5th, noting that they were not challenging the project and they were fine with it moving forward.
All right, perfect. And that's all I had.
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead, Tony.
I made the motion, and that was not the motion that I made for the continuance. There was no caveat of what it was for. It was just a continuance to rehear it this week.
Okay. With that, anybody have any questions for staff before we ask for comments? Do we have somebody representing this project, Ben? Could we have them come forth then?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commission, Jeremy Kraut, applicant's representative, here to give a brief overview. Again, like Ben mentioned, I have a number of slides that we have that we can go over, some of which were presented at the last hearing, some additional ones if additional questions come up relative specifically to traffic that I can get into, or I have some team members here that are much more astute at me at some of the topics like traffic engineering and also architecture and design. So I'll rely on them if those questions come up, if you don't mind. But first, just wanted to say thank you for hearing us tonight. Again, it doesn't seem that long ago when we were before you, but a lot has happened in that short time. I want to commend your staff for working diligently with the City of Cal Mesa to address the comments. We got updates along the way to just make sure that that the applicant themselves and the team were aware of the requirements that were coming through so that we could analyze and be ready to respond to them. The applicant has conveyed that they are in concurrence or have no issues with the revised conditions of approval that are before you tonight. So they have agreed to those and can answer any questions specific to that if you'd like. Again, I know two commissioners here weren't at the hearing before, so again, if you have some specific questions, but I'll go through the presentation in the meantime. Just an overview of the site, again, from an aerial perspective. Again, as you heard probably from the staff and in the staff report, the regional commercial designation does allow industrial uses subject to a CUP. And importantly, in the specific plan EIR, it assumed 9,660 trips would be associated with this site under that use. So that was what was analyzed in the EIR as far as the the amount of trips that could come out of this site if it were developed under commercial use. That's, again, the EIRs are intended to analyze the quote-unquote worst case scenario. So it was looking at a higher trip generating use for this site in this location. From a design perspective, I know there was some presentation before, so again, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but really a lot of attention to detail was paid to the adjacency to the freeway with the landscaping, and that was presented here with also just a recognition that with the type of use, the city and its community members and people passing through do not want to just see blank sides. So working with your staff to enhance the architectural image of it, to make it look more office-like rather than industrial, is really important from the beginning of the project. And your team, your staff worked really closely with the design team to ensure that occurred. This was actually an older rendering, but the newer rendering that was provided, just because that this is an actual view simulation as requested. I know that it was presented in your packet, but it was really to look at the off-ramp condition, which would be, or on the freeway condition, because that's going to be the essentially the view from the majority of the people coming past the site. The site is set in from the county line road, so that you wouldn't see it necessarily from that road. The primary view corridor would be from the freeway, so that's why the view simulation was presented. And then from an access perspective, which I went over at the last hearing, again, just for a quick highlight on it, showing the passenger car entrances versus the truck entry, and that was really distinct. It was created in distinct entries separate from one another, so that the intermingling would be limited and enhanced safety would occur. You can see on that south side where you can see what's labeled as truck entrance, just to indicate the truck entrance actually to the north, but that's where the RV station, restaurant, or the coffee shop and fast food is planned. Only phase 1 is shown on the aerial there as being developed. And as far as the location here, again, although the specific plan designates the site for commercial and it analyzed for commercial as a worst case scenario, commercial use was considered by the sellers of the property, by brokers, but because of the location set in from the county line where it does not have a direct access to county line or visibility from the road, and the proximity of nearby intersections along the freeway that have a lot of high trafficked fast food, fast casual restaurant, and other commercial uses, commercial really is not a viable use for this site. It was considered, it has been obviously an allowed use since 2008, has not been developed. So despite run-ups in the economy and commercial uses, but for a number of reasons, including, as you probably know, the type of uses these days, the trend is not for bricks and mortar, for especially on the commercial retail side, but even the service uses that are very popular these days, like the restaurant uses that you see in a number of your other freeway interchanges, it would not be viable to have at multiple intersection locations and at this location set away from the county line where it wouldn't have direct access from the freeway. So in lieu of that, a warehouse use which is planned here, which maybe from most cities or counties' perspectives who don't see this type of use very often, does actually have a very positive fiscal benefit to the city. Ben mentioned in his presentation a large multi-factor increase in the sales tax revenue for certain types of warehouse. What you see on the screen here is actually, it can be a very conservative assumption. And what's delineated here is the annual payroll of the 353 permanent employees that would be planned or expected on this type of project, totaling about 18 million. The property tax value is, again, the valuation of the project site upon development of the project, and that's estimated to be about 120 million, which includes the property, the actual land value, and the cost of the improvements on the site. And that compares, just for brief comparison, to the existing site, which is only valued about 3.5 million and generates about $150 per year or less of property taxes to the city, compared to developed condition, which would be about 420,000 per year of property tax revenue that's based off of the property tax revenues that we understand the city receives from property taxes in the city. Additional annual revenue, which includes property and new vehicle license fees and other tax and license fees that the city receives on an annual basis. And in total, the estimated annual revenue is about 525,000. That's on a direct basis. When you add in the indirect, which includes the additional money that the employees and people working for the warehouse would be spending in the community. It could increase quite a bit from there. And that's for a warehouse type use that doesn't have a point of sale use. When there's a point of sale use of some conservative amount, we looked at other projects on a conservative side that could increase that by over 1 million per year. So it could be a very substantial increase depending on the type of use that would go into the warehouse facility. And if you were to compare that to a restaurant or other fast casual type use, which each of those restaurants generate about $20,000 per year in annual sales tax that go to the city, you'd have to have about 26 restaurants in place of that warehouse to generate the same amount of revenue. So pretty big difference there from if you're looking at the types of uses. And of course, commercial, again, generates a lot more trips than the warehouse use would generate. We mentioned or you heard from your staff about the 1.8 million in development impact fees. When you look at the 75% cost of the estimated cost of the intersection improvements, intersection improvements at the freeway interchange, about $900,000. That's 75% of this 1.2 million in cost of that signal. The total cost goes to over 2.7 million of costs that the project would contribute to the city in terms of infrastructure, development impact fees, and other fees that are occurring. And again, that's when you compare that to a commercial use that could be allowed at this location as well. Commercial uses generate fewer per square foot or per acre fees for the city, and it'd be about $187,000 less if it's commercial use, yet 8,832 more vehicle trips. So again, a big comparison, increase in trips, fewer fees going to the city as a result of that use. So at this point, I have a number of slides that are really specific to traffic generation. I'll talk about a couple of these, but I know that was a focus of the last discussion. Again, we have our traffic engineer here who analyzed the project and prepared the analysis memo that was included in your packet that could answer anything more specific as far as questions you may have. But just quickly, the project did have the traffic analysis memo that was completed for the project. And what that was based on was the City of Calimesa approved traffic study that was completed for the two-phase element of the RV fueling station, drive-through, coffee donut shop use as well. And from a trips perspective, this use obviously has a number of more trips than the proposed use, 2,977 according to the City of Calimesa Commission study for just the gas station and the fuel or the coffee and donut shop versus the 632 total trips that were estimated for the warehouse use. So again, a big comparison, again, change from comparison from the existing or from the proposed and under development RV storage or RV gas station and fueling station and the donut and coffee shop to the warehouse. So that's a quick overview of what the analysis provided. From that analysis, the intersection improvements without the warehouse project, the fueling station and donut and coffee shop would be responsible for upfront 100% cost of the signals at the interchange. With the warehouse project, which if that goes forward first, would be responsible for taking over that cost and then splitting the cost 75% to the warehouse, 25% to the RV fueling station. But even though the traffic analysis showed only 19% on one intersection, on one leg of the intersection, and 14% and 19% of the costs would be applicable to the warehouse. So again, increasing from 19 to 14% of the intersection costs to 75% under the current conditions of approval. So that's an overview of just the intersection and the costs that are going there. With that improvement, I'll note that the existing failing intersection at the interchange intersections would increase to level service B. So a very significant increase. The interim traffic signals would result in a significant improvement well above the required grade for the level of service. So with that, I can answer any specific questions, but just wanted to thank you again for the time and for letting us be before you tonight, and look forward to further discussion with you.
Commissioners, anybody have questions?
Surprise.
Go ahead, Mr. Hicks.
So one of the first ones you said, you've got 353 employees. And now, is that based on distribution center?
No.
Okay. That's based on the minimal use, correct?
Right.
So a distribution center that would bring in the additional tax revenues would be probably 3 shifts, 3 times that much, correct?
No, actually, so the numbers that I provided for the tax benefits, those were the warehouse use. So those physical benefits were the warehouse use. And the warehouse type use could have multiple shifts as well, and that was assumed in the analysis that was provided. Certain uses could have additional employees, but from a minimum perspective, that's what the typical use warehouse would provide.
So the minimum is 353, is
That's
that
right.
correct? But your traffic study only says 632 trips per day. Just 353 employees times 1 trip in, 1 trip out is 706. That doesn't account for 38 loading docks, 55 trailer parking spots. So I don't know how we can understand, or how I can understand, how this traffic study with 632 trips is possible. And that's based on the minimum number of employees. That's not if you're successful in getting a Amazon distribution warehouse.
Yeah, I
But
have
that
the
would be-
traffic engineer that could speak to it. The one thing I'll just point out is
Well,
that
this is, we're just questioning what you've presented. So that's my question on that. So basically, that's a flawed number, would you say?
no, it's not. It's
How-
based on the Institute of Traffic Engineers, which
Well,
is a
I'm just saying,
nationwide
just,
analysis. and it
just from
has-
a
it
layman's
does-
standpoint of
No, that-
632 trips versus you're telling me you got 353 employees that are gonna make 2 trips a day, 1 in, 1 out?
Well, again, from the Institute of Traffic Engineers, which does analyze the employee counts.
I guess
and
they're
it
much
wouldn't do
smarter
that.
than I am, so I don't understand that
The
logic.
traffic
but-
engineers are much smarter than I am too.
So, a couple of other things that you brought up. One was indirect costs or daytime activity that Ben had on there. I've lived on that side of the wash, which has always been considered the Calamason Wash for 35 of the last 40 years. I hadn't really thought about this until this last couple of weeks, but there's a lot of talk in all of these meetings about the money staying in Yucaipa from all of our residents going outside of Yucaipa, spending their money on food and entertainment and the likes in Redlands and other cities. I have spent the majority of my 40 years buying in Calamasa because I travel from that side of the washdown and use this on and off ramp. So the majority of my money over these years has been spent to support the city of Yucaipa, or the city of Calamasa, which I don't complain about. You know, I consider Calamasa just like I do Yucaipa. I've never, until being on this commission, I've never really understood that there was a difference in it. So I have a hard time following the numbers. My money's all spent down the hill. I think Calamasa enjoys seeing this kind of a project going there because it cuts down on any potential commercial restaurant use from taking money away from their citizens because their citizenry would also use anything that was developed in this area. But again, I've been told that the Planning Commission made this determination on what's allowable in the commercial area. But I also am aware that the Planning Commission just adopted 900-some thousand for a new study to revisit all the freeway corridor planning and zoning. So it's not like it's the Bill of Rights. This stuff changes from time to time depending on what's going on. And so, again, I hate this because I am pro-development. My problem is with this personally. That all aside, I would still vote to approve this based on all those things that I just stated. But my problem is the traffic on it and what it does to that side of Yucaipa and also Calamasa. And I don't think Calamasa will oppose it for the reasons that I just stated. They would much rather see this be a large industrial than take money out of their city. But the traffic is the problem, and I don't see the fix for it. I appreciate the 75-25 because I was told at the last meeting that this was a $30 million project, but you show me that the valuation for tax purposes is $120 million. And I think that's probably a lot closer to what the real value of this project is rather than the $30 million that was stated at the last meeting. So I cannot fathom how with 36 bay doors, 55 trailer parking spots, where you're not going to have a number of vehicles per day going through there. And those trucks, I don't know what they count for in a traffic study, to be honest with you. So I just know that one 353 employees per day for one shift, not the potential that the building would have for 3 that would bring the tax revenues in, which is a great thing and we need, and I would like to see it. I just don't want to see it at the expense of the traffic that is going to cause everyone on that side of the wash trying to get to and from the freeway. And so with that said, I want to go back to one point on the motion that I made last week to
Amend it.
pardon me?
Amend it.
No, to the motion that I made last week was to continue this to this meeting. It was not specific to any one thing. There was a lot of discussion about different items, but it was definitely, my motion was not specific to Calamasa and that item, the 70, or the 70, what was it, 78, 22% split between the station. Again, I thought that was unfair, but that was only one of the many points that was discussed, and I don't want my motion to be mischaracterized.
Okay, you know, while we were bringing up the traffic, I look on page 3, third paragraph, where it says the intersection delay. It says the city of Calamasa traffic engineer provided a public comment noting that they became highly concerned with the project upon their review that there would be delay at the ramp intersection that is in the thousands of seconds range, and such significant delay condition was highly unusual, and it should be noted that the current roadway operates at a peak deficiency, a level of service of DNF. So, I mean, that itself.
Yeah, I'll note actually that, the city of Calamasa study actually did identify about 4,000 second delay. So it wasn't this project, it was their RV gas station and coffee use. So their study, which we showed on that screen, was the source of that delay. This project adds to that delay, I'll note, but it's incremental. It's not doubling or anything like that. Their trips, as I mentioned before, total over 2,000 trips for their use alone compared to the 600 for this use. And just back to Commissioner Hicks, to note on the number of employees, the employees themselves, this is for, again, they look at a typical day. Not all employees are on a site on one day. So again, that's what's assumed and characterized in the traffic engineer's analysis and memo that is, or manual that is used across the nation, including by your own city staff and the city of Calamasa, I'll note. They all use the same manual with the same trips, and so that's why you may not see a direct correlation number of employees to the number of trips per day, but because they do account for multiple shifts and not everyone appearing on site on one day. But just to the chairman's note, yeah, the intersection delay that you mentioned was in the existing condition. When the projects are added without the interim signals that are proposed, yes, there is a continued failure at those intersections, but with the signals, the delay is removed. The intersections go from level of service D and F to B, so that it is a significant increase in the conditions and improvement in the existing condition of those intersections when the signals are constructed.
Any other commissioners?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and it regards the letter that was apparently delivered today by email from Attorney Mitchell Sy. Have you had a chance to review that?
Yes, Commissioner Brzee, and as Mr. Matlock noted, the request is specific to local serving or local workforce. It does not provide any new analysis or information that changed the findings of the CEQA document that was prepared. A response to the comment was sent to Mr. Matlock via email just as the meeting started, but I'll note from the responses that were prepared, none of the analysis identified any flaws or impacts that would require any revision to the addendum. And as Mr. Matlock noted, none of the findings or none of the thresholds in the air quality and GHG analysis were triggered or went over the threshold in the analysis itself. So although Mitchell Sy, the attorney, identified a benefit from local serving workforce in terms of additional reduction from greenhouse gas, additional reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and air quality emissions, it didn't. The project itself was not exceeding the thresholds anyway. So just being additional reduction in your conditions of approval does have a requirement for additional for local serving workforce.
Was there ever any comments submitted to the applicant or any discussion between the applicant and Mr. Sy or the union that he represents prior to this letter?
Not prior to the letter, the Carpenters Union. I'll note that the applicant and their general contractor work very closely with union labor throughout Southern California and have agreements with them, with the unions, including carpenters, and that was, they just had no discussion prior to this meeting, but since then tried to reach out just to make sure that they were aware of that prior arrangement in terms of agreements. But again, since the analysis didn't require any further changes, no changes are needed to the study.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. So I think after yesterday and clearly here today, the biggest issue is just the traffic. It seems like a great project. It looks beautiful. I think it's going to be great for the city of Yucaipa. It's a matter of time before we get something like this. Every other city's getting them. Why not do it right from the beginning? But as far as the traffic goes, is there, from your engineers, was there any other solutions? I mean, could we put roundabouts? Can we, I mean, you have, when you get off on Cabazon, you know, or off of Morongo, when you go out to the outlets, you know, they have the two roundabouts on both sides of the freeway. There's space to do one on one side of the freeway, obviously not on the other side. But can we move the on and on ramps? Can we do the looping? You know, I work out in Palm Desert, and all the freeways out there, you get on and you go like this to get on the freeway. Every single, and they've redone all of those. But I mean, for those of us who are familiar with Redlands, Redlands did what we're talking about doing on California Street when they widened that and redid their on and off ramps. And it's still a nightmare. I mean, it still takes you 20 minutes to get on the freeway. So is there any other type of solution that you guys considered in regards to how to mitigate this? And now, I didn't realize there's also gonna be an RV fuel spot. Now you're adding another, 50, 60 feet to all of the traffic that's coming and going. Granted, the number of vehicles don't change, but the size changes. And then whatever other growth and development that happens on that side. So is that, just from you guys, was any of that considered, not considered? Can we consider it?
Perhaps I can add some detail. So as part of the traffic analysis, For this project, it does assume the full build out of that fuel station project. So they assume this is going to be in place, those trips and the necessitation of those interim signal improvements. And then this project would also trigger that. And so in order to address the impacts of what's here and now plus the development of these projects, they would provide the interim signal improvements that would improve what's already a non-functioning type of off-ramp location and make those necessary improvements. Long-term, with the development of the Freeway Corridor specific plan and the Mesa Verde specific plan and other developments that are proposed, other specific plans in the city of Cal Mesa, is long-term plans to address that off-ramp location and the design. And so right now, both the city of Yucaipa's capital improvement program as well as Cal Mesa is to kick off what's called the project study review process with Caltrans of what is the future signal or off-ramp design supposed to be. If you look at the traffic study that was done for the fuel station project, they do reference perhaps roundabouts being part of that design or future improvements. And so the way that that gas station was built was allowing enough future right-of-way space to accommodate that. But the PSR process will help dictate some of the initial designs, and when it goes through the Caltrans process, they refine, okay, how much right-of-way do we need? What does the flow need to be? What is the total build-out and cumulative impacts of these different projects? And then what would be the appropriate design to accommodate that stuff? And so there is a process through Caltrans that helps address those different stuff, and both the city's Freeway Corridor specific plan, EIR, as well as the Mesa Verde address that kind of cumulative stuff and recognizing that over time additional work will be needed for that off-ramp to address the ultimate build-outs of that stuff.
And if I may add to that, just to answer Commissioner Wolf's question, that process that you described where they look at the different geometrical design, the different types of interchanges, that is part of that PSR, PR process that Ben mentioned that Caltrans goes through, and that's the process. That's something that the City of Cal Mesa and City of Yucaipa are going to start. And again, that process is based off of the ultimate build-out, not just one specific or two projects that are being developed. It's designed to analyze the ultimate land use for the adjacent area, which in this case would be both within the City of Yucaipa and City of Cal Mesa.
Okay. Are we going to connect that to the new Wildwood on and off ramp when that gets built?
The
two
freeway
County Line Road and that south side?
So as part of the existing freeway corridor specific plan, as well as the kind of update that's being proposed, and I do want to, I think, cover an important point on that, is there will be roadway connectivity through the freeway corridor specific plan. Part of it is for the circulation. You have multiple points of ingress, egress to the development. And so as those future projects come through, the timeline for that connection is one of the later phases for the freeway corridor specific plan. But as that happens, you'll see additional connectivity for the overall area and then connecting to the Interstate 10 freeway. I do also want to note, as part of the update to the freeway corridor specific plan, a few different study sessions have been held with City Council on the land use plan. And as part of that, they did identify that as part of the land use matrix, that would be business part. So the land use that's proposed tonight would align with what City Council has viewed as the update to the freeway corridor specific plan as well. So it is consistent with that overall direction of changes with the freeway corridor specific plan. But it is right now as a conditionally permitted use already within the freeway corridor specific plan, but it would just align those different elements in the future as well. So it isn't contrary, I guess, to where the City Council had provided at least high-level input on that study session.
So right now, now we know what's going to happen in the future, right? And the future will absolutely accommodate this project. So, but right now, it doesn't. Is there any, can we widen the off-ramp right there? Is there any other, like there's plenty, it's one lane. You get off on County Line Road right there, it's one lane. Can you imagine how many trucks are gonna be backing that up and how long it's gonna take even with the stoplight? But there's plenty of room to put a second lane in for a right turn. Are there mitigating little things that we can do that can help offset some of what the concerns are right now? And putting another lane in could be one of those things. Same thing with getting on the freeway on the other side. The other thing I'd like to find out is, and maybe for me, you can answer this, as far as like the striping and all that type of stuff, the timers of the lights, is there enough room to accommodate trucks who are leaving the warehouse, the RVs who are leaving the warehouse, and they're gonna go under the bridge and they're gonna wanna make that left-hand turn to get onto the 10 westbound? And are we gonna have something set up to make sure that those vehicles are not blocking the intersection? So that way, when I wanna go through to make my left-hand turn, I can still be able to do that. Otherwise, am I gonna be sitting at a light? Okay, look, the light just cycled through, now the light cycled through again, now the light cycled through again. As I'm trying to get off the freeway and make my left-hand turn, I can't because the big rigs are right there because it's such a short space.
So the interim traffic signal improvements that are being discussed, again, it include the signalization of the on-off ramps on both sides of the freeway, as well as intersection improvements. Now that process, that's something that will have to be processed, and reviewed and approved and permitted through Caltrans. So they will look at all that. And as what is typical is when you have the two traffic signals that are next to each other like that, you can synchronize the signals. In other words, connect them, and then as part of the timing or the phasing of those signals, you do incorporate any other driveways or the proximity of any other streets, which in this case would be County Line Lane. And in the future, if there is a signal installed at County Line Lane and County Line Road, that can also be connected with the on-off ramp signal. So they will talk to each other, for lack of a better term. And if they are able to be synchronized to connect to each other, then that's where that timing and the distance and everything is included. And that's how you see the improvement in the level of service from D and F to level service C and B, because of that efficiency and the fact that they're timed together and they're connected, along with they do the math that's required to get everything to work correctly based on the intersection configuration and everything. So what you described, it's been done. It's something that you see, in an example is that the new Tippecanoe and Redlands Boulevard and on-off ramps. All of those are interconnected together. If they were not able to be connected together, they would not be working as efficiently as they are now.
I do want to also, I think, note as part of the condition, as part of the signal that they would install, they would actually be installing longer mast arms to allow for a future lane. So whenever that development threshold is met, we essentially have, a second stage of interim improvements that can get triggered for those projects until the ultimate improvements are done. And then I think one last element, I know California Street was brought up in the city of Redlands, and in terms of the development capacity in Redlands has, I think over 50 million square feet of warehousing uses in the donut hole of the San Bernardino County and the city of Redlands on one side of the freeway, as well as their hospital or the Kaiser Permanente facility. And then on the other side, California Street is a connecting street for both the cities of Loma Linda and the city of Redlands. And so there's a lot more, while that intersection certainly is congested and complicated, there's a lot more development there versus this particular project or what's happening within the city of Calamasa and the city of Yucaipa versus what's happening in the donut hole area of the city of Redlands and that East Valley corridor specific plan.
Right.
But with all that development, though, there's a lot more access on California going down. They got 2 lanes, very long exit lanes. We have short exit lanes on County Line. I can't imagine that they can be any longer. And they have a huge underpass with at least 2 lanes and probably a left turn lane, maybe 4 or 5 lanes on California Street to allow people to do their turning. We have an underpass on County Line Road that's barely big enough for 1 lane going east and 1 lane going west. And it's not going to get any better In fact, it's going to absolutely, what it's going to do, and I'm not into being a prophet of doom, but what it is going to do, if this all shakes out the way everybody seems to want it to, the businesses up on County Line Road will absolutely be gone. Because nobody's gonna bother to go get off the freeway at that Calamasa exit and fight this kind of traffic. And all of the proposed revenue that the city of Yucaipa is going to get from noontime lunches is all gonna go to Calamasa. As Commissioner Hicks has already said, there's 1 million fast food places down on Calamasa Boulevard. Nobody's gonna go all the way into Yucaipa. I mean, I just see, I just don't see it as a good use when we haven't solved the problem at County Line Road and I-10. That, and we can sit here around this very comfortable table in an air-conditioned room and talk about going from level of service F to level of service B. And if you want to talk to the people that are stuck in the freeway out there and tell them, but folks, you should be happy because we're at level service B. Yeah, they'd probably punch me out. They don't care. They're sick of being stuck in traffic, and that's what's going to happen. It happens down towards Redlands, but now it's going to be right in our yard. And I just think I think something needs to be done with with the whole situation at the interchange there. I mean, at the County Line and I-10. Resolve that reasonably rather than theoretically. And that would take time. But once we put a building over there that's going to draw people, it's too late. Then it's too late to try and figure out how do we fix this. There's no fix then, because now you've got all kinds of traffic, and it's just, I think it's putting the cart before the horse.
Mr. Chair, there's been a lot of discussion regarding traffic, and I believe there's still a few questions that have been asked regarding the traffic study, so perhaps as part of the applicant's presentation, this is a good time to ask their traffic engineer to come up and answer the questions.
Yeah, sure.
That could be, because the traffic study was done by the applicant, if I'm not mistaken, right? Which makes sense.
It was actually based on the City of Calamasa's traffic study. So the City of Calamasa did the traffic analysis for the gas
For
station. And so
their
we used,
refueling station.
right, so their numbers were used in the basis for this traffic study, because there's no need to redo all that if that was already an accepted study for their use. And that analyzed all of the segments and intersections that were applicable to the proposed project.
I'm still, and I didn't understand Commissioner Hicks, the answer that Commissioner Hicks got regarding 353 full-time employees per shift and is that correct?
No, again, because I'm not a traffic engineer, I'd love it if we have the expert come up and address that specific question, if you don't mind.
I'll follow up on that question. And or
Okay,
maybe
let's,
Commissioner Hicks wants to.
Let's, for me, could you bring that, the traffic study up, or?
Well, actually, their traffic engineer is here.
She's here. Hey, Ben, while she's coming up, my last question is, who is responsible for this intersection? The city of Calamasa, the city of Yucaipa, or Caltrans? So when complaints are coming in, lights aren't working, traffic accidents, liability, who ultimately shares the responsibility for what's gonna happen there?
You mean when the signals are installed, if they don't work?
So if something doesn't work, if we're having an abundance of accidents, if AMR can't get to a crash in time because of the congestion and a family sues us, my question is, we're looking at increasing tenfold, right, the traffic that's gonna go through there, and we're saying the lights are gonna help, but who is ultimately responsible for building that, developing that intersection, maintaining the intersection, and if something does happen, tuning the lights, like you said, timing the lights to each other, if they get off timed, if there's a short and we need to put them on flashing reds, all of that type of stuff. Which city or state, which entity, government entity, is responsible financially for that intersection?
Since those interim improvements, the traffic signals will have to be, as I mentioned, reviewed and approved and permitted through Caltrans. Once they are installed, they will be owned and operated and maintained by Caltrans, just like the signals at all other off-ramps along the 10th freeway, or most of them.
Okay, so that intersection, that interchange, or that on and off ramp, everything under the bridge, that's all gonna be the financial responsibility, maintenance responsibility, all of that stuff of Caltrans?
Yes.
Okay, young lady, if you could just give us your name and address for our records, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Megan Macias. I work with EPD Solutions. Do you need the address of our company? Okay. It's 2355 Main Street. Thank you. Sometimes I forget since we email everything. 2355 Main Street in Irvine, California, 92614.
That's good, thank you.
There's a lot to unpack here so far, so I'm going to try to address a couple of the comments I've heard so far. Commissioner Hicks, your question about the number of employees, it is fairly consistent. I'm honestly not sure where our team got that number. I know it's we have a different group besides traffic engineering that does those economic forecasts, but it is actually consistent with some of the regional forecasting. SCAG uses, they did about 20 years ago, they did an employment density study, which when you average out between Riverside and San Bernardino counties, this would be just over 300 employees for a building this size. Their latest forecasting, which came out with the latest RTP, I think that was in 2020 when the forecasting was done, it has about the same employment density for a building this size. So your concern in regards to the employees not matching the peak hour trips, and I think, Jeremy, he touched on it a little bit, but these warehouses are a 7-day per week operation. So the entire, approximately 350 employees aren't on site every day. So assuming that around 70% would be on site during a peak day during the week, that would come out to about 250 employees. And you can check my math. I'm sort of just round, I'm talking in round numbers here, but it's about 250 employees. So you figure one in, one out, it's about 500, which is consistent with the trip generation that was based on the ITE rates for warehouse. So it's all fairly consistent. Of course, it depends upon the ultimate tenant. There could be more, there could be less. And there are, in the conditions of approval, there are some safeguards if the warehouse tenant were to be something more intense, like an Amazon sort fulfillment center. I think that's always the worry, which has much higher numbers of employees. There's additional studies and mitigation that would go along with that type of tenant that the applicant has agreed to. So for the purposes of the building that's in front of you, the 350 employees, more or less, is a pretty good number and is consistent with the traffic forecasts.
Can I ask you a question? What on semis, what's your trip count? How does that work? How's that calculated?
So on semis, let me pull up the trip generation table so that I know we had.
You have 36 bay doors. So is it based on the number of bay doors or?
It's not based on the number of bay doors. It is based on the warehouse square footage. And that's based upon, the ITE trip rates are based upon surveys that are done throughout the country. We use the trip rates for warehouse. Even though this warehouse is technically a high cube warehouse, it's over 200,000 square feet. It has a higher ceiling height. There's various other conditions we use to consider it a high cube warehouse. And per the ITE, they generally have a lower trip rate per 1,000 square feet. We didn't use that lower trip rate for this project just to be more conservative and because, we were looking at a previous use that had a very high trip generation. So this is based on warehouse. There's a number of different rates for industrial uses, ranging from light industrial to manufacturing, which have the highest rates per square foot, to high cube warehouses, which are mostly automated and have the lowest number of employees. Those have the lowest trip rates per square foot. The rate we used is higher than everything except for manufacturing, light industrial, and a hand sort fulfillment center. So there's a lot of uses that would fit into the trips that were generated for this project and the trips that were analyzed for the project. I'm not sure I answered your question.
No.
Yeah, I did it. Okay,
Sorry.
I realized that. I was explaining something and I forgot the question.
For this project, how many semis per day?
Oh, how many semis? Yes, I'm sorry. So the trip, so we're showing that per day, it would be approximately 107 3 and 4 axle trucks. That's the daily trip rate. Of course, we change that into a passenger car equivalent, so that takes account for the greater effect that those trucks have on the capacity of the roadway, and that, you know, one semi feels a lot more like 3 cars if you're the one behind it.
So you have 107 semis, and that's 3 cars, so 3 trips? Is that the way that calculates?
Yes, it's for a 3 axle truck is 2, the passenger car equivalent is 2, and then the 4 axle truck, 4 plus is 3. So technically, I can tell you the passenger car equivalent is 59 plus 2. That's not it, sorry. 59 plus. It'd be 294 passenger car equivalent truck trips.
Well, you said 107 semis, so 3 times that would be 321?
Yes.
So you've got 321. You're saying 250 employees, that's 2 trips each, that's 500, so that's 821 versus your 632. And that's for the lowest use, basically, of a high cube warehouse. Some of the things that I'm familiar with is like some of the food distribution warehouses, Core-Mark that delivers to most of the convenience stores, stuff like that. But in particular, the food warehouses, which are not an Amazon, not what you typically think of as an Amazon, but they're cold storage and dry storage, and they distribute to restaurants and other things. So one in particular that is Shamrock Foods, several Shamrock Foods, McLean, a number of different ones. But Shamrock Foods, for instance, over in Ontario, they run 3 shifts. Parking lot's completely full. If you go over there to pick up a will call order, it's hard to get one of the 5 or 6 spaces that's designated for will call. The parking lot's completely full. They run 3 shifts. There's a line of trucks waiting outside to get into the parking lot to access the shipping doors on the back side. And that's honestly what I'm concerned with. You know, I'm being told, or we're being told that 632 trips, but just off this little bit of conversation, we're up to 821 trips. And again, you know,
I'm
when
sorry,
we
can you
build
repeat how we're
things-
back to 821? Because I didn't follow that.
Well,
The
you had
821.
250 average employees is what it was calculated at. So they're gonna make 1 trip in, 1 trip out.
Correct.
So that's 500, and then your truck count was 107 times 3 cars average per truck is the way you calculate it, so that's 321, which would bring you to 821 trips per day.
And I want to point out that I think we have a slide for this. Oh, hold on, let me see if I can find it. Oops. Oh, you're trying to help me. Okay, so there's a difference between, you're correct when we're talking about the passenger car equivalent trip generation. So what was analyzed is actually 828 daily trips. The just total trips without accounting for trucks. Oh, this doesn't have the passenger car equivalent. The total trips without accounting for trucks is 632. That's where that
Without
600.
accounting for trucks.
Yes, that's without accounting for the
Okay.
extra effect of trucks. But the number that was actually analyzed is 828. So that's very close to your number
Yeah.
that you had come up with.
821.
I want to address the point about cold storage, because to my knowledge, there is no cold storage proposed as part of this, but if there was, we have higher truck splits for cold storage that we would apply, and it does recognize that there's a higher percentage of trucks in a cold storage project. And so I believe that would probably be accounted for in that condition, where if the project was going to generate a significantly higher number of trips than what was accounted for, they'd have to go back and mitigate for that. So cold storage in and of itself doesn't necessarily generate more overall trips, but it generates more truck trips, which when you account for the passenger car equivalent is
So I
higher.
guess my next question would be, what's that threshold where it would have to have an additional approval? So what's the threshold of total traffic or projected traffic before the city would require additional approval for a use? Because that's, my concern is, this is best case scenario, 821 per day trips. I think that's best case, because this is projected at, even on a high cube warehouse, which the whole ideal with building a high cube warehouse is you want a bigger tenant that has more space, that's gonna operate more, and he's gonna have more input and more output. So that's best case. Worst case, if it was a cold storage facility or an Amazon, because we brought the numbers in, of what the additional revenue would be off of taxes if it was an Amazon distribution warehouse. So what would the traffic be if it was an Amazon distribution warehouse?
If it was an Amazon distribution warehouse, it would be probably 3 times higher than what we're talking about here.
Right.
And that specific use would trigger further study and additional mitigation likely.
Right.
But I do, your concern is that the trip generation is maybe not accurate, and I will absolutely admit that, when we base trip generation on empirical evidence, so we believe that it's fairly accurate. But of course, like I said, it'll range depending on who the tenant is. One thing we did this afternoon, just for our own knowledge, was to say, okay, what if we're completely wrong? What if this generates twice as many trips as we think it's going to? And so we reran the analysis at the intersections, the ramp intersections with the signals. And what we found is that it doesn't, most of them stay at level of service C. I believe it was the eastbound ramp in the morning would go to level of service D, which is still acceptable per the city's guidelines. So there's some wiggle room in terms of how well these interim improvements, the 2 traffic signals, like how well that they would mitigate traffic in the interim condition. And as has been noted, that's not going to be the future final build out of that interchange, that there is a future project in place that I believe it's in the fairly near future that's planned to be implemented. So, and the other thing I do want to point out with the question of how well can these 2 traffic signals mitigate the traffic, I should say the short-term traffic at the interchange. And the 2 studies that were prepared, the Calamasa, the RV study, RV fueling, as well as the warehouse study, both of them accounted for a significant amount of other projects. So there's a lot of other traffic that's loaded in there, and that's where we get that, the delay that's in the thousands. It's because there's a lot of traffic at a 2-way stop-controlled intersection, and I think we all know that just doesn't work well, especially when you put trucks into the mix. But the traffic signals, they would provide a significant amount of improvement. It's not like you're gonna put in 2 signals and then nobody's gonna notice that it got any better. It would be a significant amount of improvement. And also considering that much of that development that we analyzed as part of the background condition may not come online even until the other improvements at the interchange are in. So there's a lot of speculation in saying, well, this won't provide, the improvement that we need. It actually will provide a significant amount of improvement.
My concern would be, one is, when you do these types of studies, you've got 107 truck traffic projected 107. You spread that out over a period of time during the day in your studies, and there's no way to regulate that. You don't know whether those are all coming in a 4-hour period or a 2-hour period or a 24-hour period. And you're gonna have highs and lows based on what the actual use of the warehouse is. So again, my concern would be that number of trucks, and like Lloyd had said, Commissioner Rexted had said, if you have trucks coming out of that warehouse stacked up underneath that overpass, which is about 3 full-size semis, 100 foot long, that'll fit under that, between those signals, maybe three semis in one car. then it doesn't matter how that light changes. The cars are not going to be able to make that left turn off the freeway to go into Yucaipa. And if you sit there and look at that intersection, you've got, in the afternoon, you've got, 100 cars to one that are turning left instead of turning right, that live in that area down there. So that's my big concern is traffic, and I think the projections, if this thing was at the 821, that's bad. If it's at 2 times that, it's really bad. If it's at 3 times that, we all better look for a new place to live because we approved this. So,
And it's a dilemma because if this project moves forward, everybody wants it to be successful. But if it's going to be successful, everybody's going to die in the traffic.
right.
And that's what's
Well, no,
happening.
because the success will be its own downfall because the users of these buildings also look at the traffic. And you're not gonna get a big high-end, the reality of it is, in my opinion, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but in my opinion, you're not gonna get an Amazon warehouse that's gonna generate the tax revenue you want because this will not meet their traffic flow requirements to get to and from the freeway in a timely manner. So we're not gonna pick up that kind of revenue off of it. I think the long-term is the Wildwood exit. That Wildwood exit that's already had the money put towards design and development on it, that's what's gonna provide the access for these industrial buildings on that. I don't disagree with the industrial buildings over there. I don't have a problem with it. I just have a problem with, the interchange to get Caltrans to approve the interchange, to get the design done on it, to get the upgrades done on it, you're at least 10 years out for a full-blown interchange.
You guys told us that 2 meetings ago, too.
Well, to get the two signals, I once built a gas station and a fast food restaurant with a fully designed on and off ramp and overpass that was going to be started the following year, that 11 years later was finally built. And so these things, run into all kinds of problems. So
If I can address.
exactly to your point is, you don't know how long it's going to take to fix it.
And we don't know who the tenant's going to be.
And I think the best solution is finish Wildwood, which has already started, and then you can build these type of things out all along there. But
And what about County Line Road? What is Calamasa saying? Not County Line Road, Singleton. So my understanding is the city of Calamasa, or with Caltrans, aren't they going to redo that whole intersection as well on Singleton? And
it'd be a long ways to travel to this. So the only access would be Calumet Boulevard.
Well, with that, anybody have any other questions, staff, for this traffic study?
I do. I have a question for Ms. Macias. Ms. Macias, the study that you guys are presenting is based on the industrial use of this property. Do you have the numbers if we were to use this property for the purpose intended, which was residential commercial?
We do, because that's what it was designated for in the specific plan. So if it was designated regional commercial, granted, we wouldn't have the same amount of truck traffic, but the daily trips were forecast to be 9,660 trips for this site, as opposed to our 828 passenger car equivalent trips.
All right, so what I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say that in the peak hours, it's significantly different as well. That was the worst peak hours in the PM. It was 869 trips that would be associated with a commercial site, whereas the warehouse generates 90 trips. And if I could just really quickly address the question of how many trucks show up at the same time. So what the ITE rates show is that during the peak hours, there's approximately 15 trucks during the peak hours. So assuming In the best-case scenario, they're all nice and spaced out, right? That's a truck every 4 minutes. Assuming that they're not spaced out, you know, there's obviously Armageddon or Carmageddon as you're describing, but I think that the tenant probably doesn't want that condition either. And so it would probably come down to, you know, the management of the site and the arrival of the trucks. And I don't think the drivers want to be in that condition either. So we do assume a somewhat consistent arrival rate when we do the analysis throughout the peak hour.
I appreciate it. That was it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, Ben, do we have public comments?
We do have a few, and Maddie will read them off.
Jeffrey Scott.
Give him the 3 minutes.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jeffrey Scott. I actually grew up in the area before I moved out. Lived up off of the Boulevard and 3rd, right behind the church over there, with my dad, who's in attendance. So, know the area pretty well. Very familiar. I'm a special representative and outreach specialist for the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, aka the Carpenters Union. One of my roles and responsibilities is to work with the youth in a mentorship, bringing back the trades to the different high schools. A project such as this would create a lot of opportunity for those students at Yucaipa High School, Yucaipa Adult School, to have that opportunity to get their foot in the door in the trades. Excuse me. So for that reason alone, I'm very much in favor of this project and you proposing the pass of this project. But just living in the area, knowing what that county line road gets like sometimes, doing those long drives to LA, things like that, it's going to create opportunities for the members that live up here, the residents that live up here that would work on a project like this, the opportunity to be with their families. I've grown up in the trades, didn't get to have my dad at a lot of these events, my racing, baseball, things like that growing up. So this is something that it allows those members to live close to home, work close to home, to actually take some of the cars off of the road that are driving in from LA, Orange County, things like that. So I really urge you to consider passing this project and moving it forward to the next phase. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Jack Kufdarli.
Just state your name and address for our records, please, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jack Koftarali, 139 Radio Road, Corona, California. You guys have been speaking of the proposed project that is next to the gas station all night. I am the owner of the gas station. I'm here to speak on behalf of the project in full support. I have no skin in the game. I have to pay 13% to the city of Cal Mesa for improvements, regardless whether they go through or not. I don't have to pay anything further until I build the quick serve restaurant. But frankly, that restaurant on its own does not bear $1 million in traffic signal. So that will not be built until such time that that does come in on its own, and I'll just pay my fair share. So traffic is what it is currently without anyone doing anything. Nothing will be built unless they do. Caltrans has a plan to widen the off-ramp. They're going to do a roundabout. In fact, I heard staff mention that our project was built with that in mind. We already have a property that is dedicated for that project. When and if it comes, probably I'm guessing in the next 10, 15 years, they will redo that off-ramp accordingly and they will take a piece of our project when that happens. But until that does, it will remain in the condition it's at. So, I don't know, I'm not that smart, but I would think having someone come in and put in the traffic signal now is much better than waiting 10, 15 years down the line, if that ever comes. Because I've never seen Caltrans do anything when they were supposed to. So, and as traffic study mentions, you know, you guys are, I don't know, it seems to me that you're voicing concerns about the project, but if it were to be built as it was intended to, commercial, residential, that is 10 times the traffic that this project would generate. So all this, kind of concern seems moot to me, because that would be worse. But nonetheless, they come in, they build the signal. We've already reached an agreement. I will pay 25%, they will pay 75%. I think we should call it a day and go home. So anyways, good luck with all that. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer, but if not, I'll step down.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Walter Scott.
Good evening. My name's Walter Scott. I live at 11999 Vista Way, Yucaipa, California. The reason I would like you guys to consider this is because most of my career, and I've spent 35 years in the trade, I've had to drive to LA. So this gives myself and other members that live up here the opportunity to work close to home. As my son previously mentioned, I missed a lot of his youth having to drive and go to work. This will give us a chance to work close to home. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chris Silva.
Evening, everybody. My name is Chris Silva. I live at 37095 Oakview Road. I too am a Yucaipa resident. I am also co-workers with Walter Scott, and have been in the trade for over 35 years. I really encourage this project because working close to home beats driving down into Long Beach and LAX and sometimes even further. We really welcome the commercial industry for union work, and we hope this all goes with flying colors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ernie Regalado.
Good evening. My name is Ernie Regalado. I live at 34480 County Line Road and 5th, right pretty much where this project's gonna be built. I'm here in support for this project because I'm gonna touch a different route as them because I grew up here. My whole family grew up here. My mom was 30 years in the school district. And I didn't have a great youth, and until I met up with members of the Southwest Carpenters Union is when I was able to make a change and actually have pride in myself again. I've been through all kinds of institutions and all this and all that. Nothing worked. Nothing made me change until I was able to have some pride in myself again. And I've always been interested in construction. As a kid, seeing all these projects being built, I was like, I want to do that. And imagine what it will do to our youth right here. I know we have a lot of young people interested in construction, in the trade right now. And I have a lot of people out here in Yucaipa that ask me, hey, can you get me on? Can you get me on in your project? I'm a bridge carpenter in Ontario right now on the 10 freeway. But they don't have reliable transportation. So I can't do that, And if there was a project out here that was being built by skilled labor, there's more opportunities and to get their foot in the door and to create a change. Since I joined the Carpenters Union, I could drive. I've mostly worked in downtown LA, LAX. It used to take me 4 or 5 hours to get home. I understand the traffic situation. I get off on County Line, but the alternative of something that can come good of that is changing some of the stuff that's going on out here, the homelessness, just a lot of stuff going on with our youth right now. But I'm in strong support of this project because it'll create a lot of jobs and maybe change a lot of lives. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madeline?
Bonnie Johnson.
Good evening, Commissioners. Bonnie Johnson, City Manager of the City of Calamasa. I'm here tonight with my city engineer, and we were at the last Planning Commission. We had our city engineer, our traffic engineer, our planner, our mayor. The gang was all here. And I just want to tell you, we have made significant progress, like our developer, Jack Coffidarilli, who spoke earlier. We've made progress toward getting the signal in sooner than later, which I think is progress toward the level of service at the intersection. To respond to a couple questions that were asked about whose responsibility it is, Mr. Preciadio is correct. It is Caltrans ultimately, but it's the city of Calamasa and the city of Yucaipa that will be working together through Caltrans to make that happen. So I have discussed this many times with Mr. Casey. We've talked very recently on this topic, and we're working to get that project study report process kicked off for the ultimate improvements, but it unfortunately takes time. So with that, as was represented earlier, we're not here tonight to oppose the project. We are here to say we're in favor of the condition of approval. The condition also requires an MOU between the cities, and we'll look forward to negotiating that, sitting down with Mr. Casey and his folks and me and my staff, and we'll get that negotiated and back on agendas for approval. So with that, I'll let my city engineer actually address a few more of the technical things, but I just wanted you to hear it from us that we're not here tonight opposing. We're here to just make sure our traffic gets mitigated. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Michael Thornton.
So good evening, Commissioners. Michael Thornton, City of Calamasa, City Engineer. Bonnie stole all of my thunder, but I will just add one thing to her comments. The intersection, it's on the screen now, of County Line Road and County Line Lane, and it's depicted by a red dot on the screen, is an intersection that, depending on the use of the building, will need some additional analysis. And as Bonnie also mentioned, we are going to work with the City of Calamasa staff to develop an MOU. And in that MOU, if we are fully supportive of whatever land use, if it's an Amazon facility that adds more traffic, we fully support that. We just need to make sure that traffic impacts are mitigated. And that will be the purpose of the MOU, to make sure that particular intersection is also looked at. But beyond that, we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask a question on that?
Go ahead.
That intersection, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So that's only half width finished right now, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so that takes the front yards out of those two houses there that's set on that street.
So the houses that front County Line Lane, I think they're, what is that, one looks like it has a pool on it there on the screen.
Yeah.
Those would be, there was some additional right-of-way that need to be acquired at the location.
Right.
Yes.
Because they don't have much setback now.
That is correct, but all along County Line Road, we anticipate that there will be additional right-of-way required to widen County Line Road.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Madeline? any-
That's all the public comments received.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. Wait a minute, Sure, come on down. Just state your name and address for our records, please, sir.
My name is Gary Womack, and I'm with Dom Commercial Real Estate, address 3595 Inland Empire Boulevard, Building 5, Ontario 91764. I'm the broker representing the owners of the property. I've been marketing that property for, 6 years. And last meeting I heard the name retail come up. Some people prefer to retail on the site, and I will assure you that I went after the retail, that site being the size it is, I went after the anchor tenants, as we can't build shop tenants on 18 acres of having hamburger and fast food and pizza. And I can tell you with certainty that Target said no. We're building only stores called urban stores, 30,000 feet, no to Yucaipa. Costco said no. We have too many stores in California, and the San Bernardino store is not impacted. It's not happening. Lowe's, Home Depot said no. Walmart, Sam said no. Walmart said, oh, maybe. We'd rather be east of you. And right now, Walmart, I'm working on something with them. They're on hold on everything, and they have been for quite a while, determining what the future is going to be. There are no more retail tenants. Looking at the sites like that. You want a good example would be, Citrus Plaza that is in the county of San Bernardino, but they refer to as Redlands. They have put a lot of retailers there, which basically took all the retail activity, sucked all the retail air out of the room in this area. And that area is fine for them, but it doesn't leave a lot of space for other opportunities in the cities. So I just want to share there's no low fruit on this. There's no retailers waiting in the wings to come on this site. There's none. We tried multifamily. The city said no. We tried senior housing. And we talked to city housing people for a period of 30 days, and they all said no to Yucaipa. The rents were too low. And with the costs going up, they just wouldn't pencil for them. And then off the retail subject, I want to share with you, there's a thing out there called a brine line. And it goes through Fontana, Ontario, Chino County areas. And that's designed, it goes all the way down to Orange County. That's designed to take food. So if you do food processing, you just can't put the residue into any sewer system. And they want to go on the brine line. So those buildings that are along the brine line, that whole area that goes for about 15 miles in our area, then it goes into Orange County, that's the area you find food operations because they have to have that line. They can't dump in a regular sewer, just to clarify that. So appreciate your time. Appreciate letting me come up here last minute.
Thank you, sir. With that, did we want a rebuttal at all from the applicant on any of the items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeremy Crowd again. As far as rebuttal, I think a lot of the comments were addressed by the traffic engineer. Again, happy to answer any further questions. But I want to just make sure it's abundantly clear that the traffic that's out on the streets today, they're out there. You heard from the developer of the gas station. It's out on the streets today. And without this project, also the signals which would result in an improvement to failing intersections wouldn't occur. I think that's a clear and an important point that was identified both the City of Calamesa's traffic study and the project traffic study. A lot of the other comments I think were pretty clear, but just want to thank you for your time and appreciate your consideration of the project.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, there has been a lot of discussion regarding the Caltrans involvement and their mitigation measures and what have you. We do have another staff member who has a lot of experience with working with Caltrans on interim signal projects like that, and perhaps this be a good time for Mr. Casey to come up and provide some additional information if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'll be brief because I know it's late in the evening. But first, I do want to say thank you to Bonnie and her team, and I thought we had a series of very collaborative meetings, a lot of communication back and forth, and that all resulted in what we all feel is a good cooperative effort moving forward. And what I really wanted to touch on briefly is this chicken and egg theory, right? Calamasa and Yucaipa are really striving to make sure that we have the intersection improvements and other improvements ahead of the development of the projects. You've seen other examples in other areas where that probably hasn't happened as well as it should. But you need that partnership with the private sector in order to do that. And why is that? Someone mentioned that the Wildwood Interchange has been under development for a number of years. That is absolutely true. We've been working on it for probably 6 or 7 years. We've been through the PSR, the preliminary study report process. We're into the PAED process. We're so far into this project in partnership with SBCTA for something like $7 or $8 million, and we've had help with our federal legislators and our state legislators. Still getting help, but they're in increments of several $1,000,000 at a time. This is a $120 million, maybe $150 million interchange project. Without the private sector partnership, you just don't get there. And at some point, we are definitely committed to getting there. With the county line interchange, same concept, different numbers perhaps, but the same concept. The idea of phasing in the interim signals, which allows us to go a level of service C with these two projects, is a benefit. It's an improvement to what we have today. As the next phase goes forward, whether it's in Calamasa or whether it's in Yucaipa, we'll get that extra lane under the bridge to the extent that the Caltrans goes along with that. We'll get the widening on County Line Road. County Line Lane, as you heard, will include some improvements if this project intensifies in any way, shape, or form. That's in the conditions of approval, and that's committed to. The experience that I have includes interim signals and then ramp widening at Yucaipa Boulevard. It includes planning for designing interim signals at Live Oak, which fortunately we didn't have to do. We've fronted the money to do a full interchange there, but that was an $18 million interchange versus a $120 million interchange. Costs have gone up a lot since then. So we have the ability to do that. We are committed to doing that. Calamasa is working on a number of interchanges right now. They've got, Mike is probably as experienced as I am. Dan's experienced as well, working with Caltrans. We're all making progress on these projects one at a time, but I can tell you that phased interchange improvements or interim signals don't take as long as a full-blown interchange like the Wildwood interchange, and we'll get those projects done. But those private partner investments have to happen along the way as well, whether whatever capacity that the commission and the council ultimately feel is appropriate. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anyone have any questions?
And by the way, I'm not here. I'm not here to testify as the city manager. I'm here to testify as someone who's worked with Caltrans for 30 years. So.
No, and my understanding is the improvements to the signals have to be completed prior to opening the building.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, but as far as any changes beyond that, I don't see this interchange or this off-ramp and overpass because of proximity of the existing buildings, existing businesses. That's never going to be a large 4-lane off or even 2-lane off and on each direction and a large overpass. It's just not, but it is the long-term plan, and I haven't actually seen it, but the long-term plan would feed this off of Wildwood.
Well, as someone mentioned earlier, there is connectivity, I think it was Ben, there is connectivity between County Line, Wildwood Interchange, and Live Oak Interchange. There's a series of arterials that connect through the freeway corridor specific plan. That's the plan. The County Line Interchange itself, Calamasa and Yucaipa has worked together on some preliminary studies, and they included roundabouts at the ramp ends ultimately. And according to that study, with the freeway corridor specific plan development and the Mesa Verde specific plan development, we were able to keep the existing bridge structure the way it was. And that's the huge cost if you have to tear out that bridge structure and replace it. Sure. But that study indicated with roundabouts, we were able to keep the existing bridge structure and widen, as somebody mentioned last meeting, within the pillars, the existing pillars. And so we believe that to be the right solution. But again, ultimate interchange project will take some time, as several folks mentioned, with Caltrans. But we believe the interim signal project, and by the way, the condition isn't just that it be completed prior to occupancy. The design has to be submitted to Caltrans prior to the design being submitted for the buildings to the city of Yucaipa. That's to make sure that folks are moving through the process and not asking for support down the road. That design has to be done at the same time the building design is being done, and the occupancy has to be, the signals have to be completed prior to the occupancy. So.
Then would the proposal on Live Oak Canyon by the Palmers, would that road be connecting to that point too then?
Yeah, the developments that are being proposed in the Palmer property, their primary connection, because it's immediately adjacent to the Wildwood Canyon interchange, would be Wildwood Interchange. There is some capacity at Live Oak, but their primary access over time will be Wildwood Interchange.
I have one question for just
Thank you.
all of you guys for the city. You guys keep talking about an MOU as being a part of the conditions, and I don't see that in here. Are we saying that, and if you can just point it out to me.
It should be condition 122.
122? It's been mentioned numerous times, and I haven't been able to find it.
Yeah, so if you look on page 19 of the conditions of approval dated 7/6/22, condition 122 does reference a MOU between the city of Yucaipa and Calamasa and collaboration with the developers. And part of it is, I think, coordinating, as City Manager Casey references, we want to make sure that these signals are in place. Both the city of Calamasa requires for the fuel station project, those signals be in place before they can finish their final phase. We have the same expectation. You're not going to be opening your doors with those signals not in place. And so the MOU is intended at a high level to help make sure that all those efforts are being coordinated. Whoever is first to the punch is accomplishing that, and that is going to be executed. Most likely, as the Calamasa developer referenced, a lot of the heavy lifting will be with this warehouse project. But at the end of the day, what the cities want to see is that those improvements are done before those businesses are open, and that helps memorialize those details and the coordinated efforts to get that over the threshold, so that way we're not stuck with, oh, Caltrans is taking their time and we aren't ready. No, the expectation is that signal is turned on and illuminated and working before you're getting a business in there.
Okay. So we're not approving an MOU. We're saying that one of the conditions of approval is that there will be an MOU that you guys will develop. Okay.
Okay, with that comment, we're going to close the public hearing, and we're going to move to the commissioners and the decisions. I mean, we've heard a lot about traffic, which seems to be the huge issue. And on the other hand, it's a project that I think it's a great project. I think the traffic is going to be sort of a nightmare, but hopefully down the road, it'll work itself out with future developments. So with that, I think we'll just move the commissioner. Lloyd, I'd like to start with you.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering if it said that the freeway corridor specific plan included an environmental impact review, but that was all done back in 2008. Now, has there not, and I know it says that that it doesn't have to be reviewed. No substantial changes are proposed in the project which would require major revisions of the EIR. How do you define substantial changes in an environmental impact review? I mean, because I think we all agree from 2008 to 2022, in 14 years, there's been a huge impact on the environmental review and the process and the impact here in the Inland Empire and here in Yucaipa.
So a better way to perhaps approach it is the CEQA process is meant to establish the high level review, and it's not meant to be where you have projects going through, every year a new study to do exactly what was already approved.
No.
And so it's part of that. As part of the analysis is looking at, here were the impacts and thresholds of the freeway corridors specific plan as a whole that was done in 2008. Are we, with this individual project, creating new impacts that were not previously part of the freeway corridor? We approving a project that's so far off from what was within the realm of that specific plan that it increases those environmental impacts. And so the addendum addresses some of the project-related stuff, but with the findings that we are still within that overall scope. As part of the freeway corridor specific plan, it is worth noting as well that it does include cumulative projects analysis, which also reference both the totality of the freeway corridor specific plan, the Mesa Verde specific plan, and the city of Calamasa, and other project opportunities within the region. So there is kind of that high level of here's the different activities that are happening. And in terms of both the city of Yucaipa's general plan as well as the city of Calamasa, in those developments, we're still within the same overall capacity. There hasn't been a number of new projects that have swung what the baseline conditions would be from that, but as part of the addendum is looking at the freeway corridor establishes this much development capacity. Are we still within it or are we exceeding it? And based on the analysis of the project as a whole, we are still within and under the impacts that were assessed part of the freeway corridor specific plan. One additional note is the traffic is under CEQA guidelines. Level service is no longer an environmental impact, only vehicle miles traveled. However, we did have that additional analysis to make sure that the appropriate measures were in place and that MOU reflects that. But in terms of the project itself, the regional commercial allows for X amount of development capacity, and this project falls within that limit and does not exceed it in any of the regards.
So the scope of the environmental impact review in 2008 was broad enough to allow this without any kind of review. Is that what you're saying, basically?
That this falls within the overall build-out assumptions and impacts that would have happened.
I mean, because this, I know that with every project, we can't revisit the environmental impact review, but this is not just a small project. That's why I'm wondering. That's why I was surprised that that there wasn't more attention paid to a 14-year-old.
No, and so it is worth noting, as part of the project and covering the environmental review, we did have a number of technical studies prepared, and then they were also peer reviewed by the city's consultant team as well. So they did go through, so they did prepare an air quality, a greenhouse gas memorandum, health risk assessment, biological resources assessment, cultural resource assessment, geotechnical, paleological assessment, phase 1 ESA, hydrology study, noise impact, trip generation, and then that traffic impact analysis. So we didn't just say the studies here were just taking it for gospel. We had a number of technical studies added to help validate that those conclusions that we're making in the addendum are in fact true. And so that was provided. So they did provide, there was a number of technical studies added in that are done today or done as part of 2021, 2022 and are relevant to help validate based on the freeway corridor EIR was here. We did all these new studies to say, are we still within where that was? Right. And the answer is yes.
Okay. Bart?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a few notes I've jotted here, and first I'd like to thank staff and the city of Calamasa and also the applicant. I think this collaborative process makes decisions for us easier when we see the parties work together, and I think that was, it might not have been the intent of Commissioner Hicks' motion, but I think that's sort of what we were looking at, was an opportunity for the parties to get together and work out their differences, which appeared to have been done here. And I think that's a commendable process and procedure, and I think all parties probably had to give a little bit to make this thing work. So thank you to you all. I'm going to be voting in favor of the project, even though I have a personal not in favor of warehouse projects generally. I see the Inland Empire becoming nothing but warehouses. Every time you drive the 10 freeway, it seems there's a new one sprouting up, and that even goes out into Beaumont. But I also recognize that my personal preferences have no bearing whatsoever. I think there are some constraints here that persuade me that this is a project worth voting for. The first and foremost being the development code. I think that's our policy document that, including the freeway corridor specific plan, policy document that dictates to us what we should be looking at. We are relying on a professional staff, and in this case, we're relying on professionals from the applicant who have looked at these issues probably for months, if not years, and have the qualifications to do so. I think also, and we haven't talked much about the findings that are required for a conditional use permit. They're on page 19 and 20 for the record of our staff report, and these, if I recall, are state dictated. For us to approve a conditional use permit, each one of these findings have to be made in the affirmative. And if you look at them and say, how would we twist those? Because to deny the project, we would have to make at least one of them in the negative. And it would require some kind of substantial evidence to do so. And I think on this record that we've had over the 15th of June and tonight, it would be difficult to do that. The second one is the biggest bone of contention, or the biggest bone of concern, which is the freeway, and it's administered by a jurisdiction that's completely out of our control. We have no control over Caltrans. I think we can persuade them and put our input, and they may be looking for that, but the final decisions on these things, as I understand it, are theirs. And we are constrained by conditions as they exist now, not conditions that we hope will exist sometime in the future. I don't know if I heard correctly, Mr. Casey, you started your comments with chicken and egg, and I took that to mean Caltrans isn't going to just go around and build new off-ramps based on the hopes or aspirations of local agencies, but they have to see a real need, and then we'll respond accordingly. So I think that's a constraint, and that's unfortunate, but I think it's real. Next on my list are the property rights of the applicant. They made a I can't even imagine what the bill is for all these experts sitting here for 2 nights. It's significant. The property's not cheap, and to work through this process, I know costs a lot of money. And they have done that in reliance on our staff indicating to them, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think this is the way the process works. If this really was a no-go and you thought that this had no chance, you would be telling them, don't waste your money, this is not likely to go through, and they would give the reasons why. But we're here tonight because our staff, with a recommendation for approval, has said, we think this meets the city's requirements, and that you should be able to get a favorable result. They can't guarantee that, obviously, because we have to make our own decision up here, but I think they're here in reliance on that and their own analysis of our development code. The next constraint that I see is the economic, and Mr. Womack, I thought your testimony was just, I don't want to say devastating, extremely persuasive. Because sometimes we sit here and think, for someone like me who doesn't have a preference for warehouses, well, why can't we have a Target? Why can't we have a Walmart? Why can't we have this or that? You put those aspirations completely to bed. That's not going to happen in the near future. And so we are faced with what we have in front of us, which is the project that we have. And finally, I look at these things come through, and what are potential opponents saying about it? Well, we had the city of Calamasa, who had some concerns, and those have been worked out very favorably. Tonight we had the owner of the service station. I think if anybody had a complaint about traffic, it would be him. And he gave his unqualified support, if I heard him correctly, for this project. I think that's very persuasive. And then to address that Commissioner Rexted had, which is the environmental concerns. I think there are environmental groups who are looking for projects that have the potential for opposition that they can successfully oppose. We got one that was thrown over the fence here at us just tonight. The letter from Attorney Mitchell Say, he sends it in on July 6th. I read through this wondering, and it's got a technical document attached as an exhibit, but if you read through here, if you are looking at this as the basis of an environmental challenge to this project, this is really tepid. at least in my experience. So the environmental issues, I think, are resolved in large part because there is an absence of real significant opposition to this, even though it is 14 years old. That is the process, and this has gotten, I think, all the environmental review. I think our staff would defend it and say, we've done everything that CEQA requires us to do. So those are my list of issues that I think have been resolved, again, with thanks to all the players, all the testimony that's been given over the 2 nights, and the work that's been done. And Mr. Chairman, that's my comments, and thank you.
You're welcome. Chris, are you still with us?
Oh, I have been, and I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to let you know, I know Mr. Casey, our city manager, said it's getting late by you guys, but it's just turning 6:30 in the morning by me. So I've been up since 4 o'clock, looking forward to this fun and exciting planning commission. But you also missed about 4 hours of our presentations and discussions from the last meeting, which I didn't mean to misrepresent Mr. Commissioner Hicks's motion. After hearing 4 hours of discussion and presentation, it was my understanding the main concern was the fair share and the traffic that were brought up by Mr. Hicks. And I learned, at least at that meeting, that because of the industrial proposal of the land use here versus the regional commercial, we were so happy because this is going to reduce the traffic by tenfolds from what it was intended for under our freeway corridor specific plan. So I was excited, and I didn't understand the resentment or the resistance to the project based on the traffic aspect of it. So with the fair share being discussed, and like Bart just mentioned, the gas station owner had the biggest interest in making sure that this is not only beneficial to the traffic, but it's beneficial to him economically. If this warehouse project is not approved, we would not see a traffic light built and installed interimly, because the gas station owner is not going to be able to do that prior to the opening of his restaurant and expanding into phase 2 of his project. So like Bart said, having heard all of the benefits and not having anything today presented that is against this project, I think the economic benefit to our city, the environmental benefit in various ways, and most importantly to me personally, who drove an hour and 15 minutes out of town to go to work, and I love not using the freeway anymore because I work in the city of Yucaipa and I operate my business out of the city of Yucaipa. I would love to see Calamasa and Yucaipa residents employed locally, and not just by working for whoever the tenant is going to be, but also the workers that will be benefiting from this major project that's going to be going on in our city. I also wanted to note how important were Mr. Regalato's comments about our youth. God knows definitely needs a little bit of motivation to not only be involved in construction, but stay and work locally. These high school kids are going away from the city of Yucaipa and working and living in different cities for their either careers or next level of education. And I'd love to see that project happening in our town to keep those kids from going away, as much as we want to see our kids grow in our own town. I also noted that Commissioner Wolf's comments about the Wildwood interchange project that's going to come up, and regardless of how many years down the road that's going to be, that's going to alleviate some of the traffic concerns and mitigate it by helping offset whatever county line on-ramp and off-ramp is going to utilize, at least when it comes to this warehouse project. The fact that the occupancy permit is not going to be issued until the interim signals go on is something that was proposed at the last meeting as well. The condition 122 was not in the initial packet, and again, back to Bart's point about the collaboration, it was a big honor to us to see the City of Calamesa's manager and engineer, despite his lack of faith in attorneys. By the way, I haven't forgotten about you there, Mr. Thornton. But here we are conducting our public service from across the world to help make sure that our cities are growing in a safe manner. Consideration for traffic, for our commute, and for the safety of our combined communities, which we see Calamasa as a sister community. And lastly, I wanted to also note Mr. Wilmack's presentation of, if we don't approve this project, it will remain empty and it will not help anybody, considering that there is no market for it in the retail industry. And how interesting of a fact that was in learning about the brine line that they need to tap into rather than the sewer line. So with all of that said, I was very excited to be present at this meeting to not only show my support, but hopefully make the motion to approve it once everyone gets to pitch in and make their comments.
Thank you, Chris. Move on to Mr. Beck.
I just want to say I think it's going to be a great project, and I'm ready for us to approve this project.
Okay. Mr. Tony Hicks.
I will just like to comment on a couple of the items. One, the lack of retail, just whether this project was retail or industrial. I think the traffic problem without mitigating those items up front is where I have a problem with, because of how it impacts traffic on that side of Yucaipa. I think it is the egg before the chicken, because the interchange needs to be developed at Wildwood. But to address the lack of retail businesses, I do know that Costco has made an offer to the pumpkin patch for their property, so Costco is interested in being in this area. I also know that a couple of major truck stop type fueling operations have been interested in these off-ramps. And so I disagree that there's not a retail component that's possible. But again, even if it was retail at this point, I would have a hard time supporting it because of the traffic. The brine line issue, I think, was directed toward my comments with the distribution warehouses such as Shamrock and others, which do not produce or manufacture any goods. They only intake, redistribute it into other trucks as orders to individual restaurants and fast foods, Circle K's. The owner of the gas station said he had no skin in the game. Where I would disagree, there's considerable skin in the game. He lives in Corona, he doesn't deal with the traffic. If he can get, whether it's 250 employees or 300 employees or the required 395, he has a captive audience in all of those employees, having the only food and the only gas station and the only convenience store, which from my observation, since that is my morning stop, is a struggling business at this point. He does not have the volume that you would expect or want out of the investment he has. And he's also stated that he won't build the food until such point that he has a stream of revenue or customers, which this would provide him that, and I think that's a great thing. I would love to see that business do better also. I think the traffic study, just with very little, just a few questions, we raised that from 632 that they were projecting to 821 daily counts. So I'm skeptical of the traffic. Just based on what I'm supposed to be looking at here, you know, the city council still has a chance to approve or disapprove this if we don't approve it here. But based on my responsibility and given the location that I live in and how I know this can potentially affect traffic just at these lower levels, you know, we've saw the traffic studies for in and out, and you know, I hate to beat that horse, but we've seen those traffic studies, and we still know what the traffic problem is with In and Out and Chick-fil-A, and that center isn't even open yet. None of the other businesses, but that, even Chick-fil-A and In and Out, that's a side street. Every resident that's affected by that lives off of that street has another exit point. The entire Yucaipa Calamasa area that's serviced off of this off-ramp has no other exit point that's reasonable, because if you're in the mornings right now, if you get on the frontage road to bypass the traffic that's at County Line Road, if there's any accident or anything, it's backed up all the way just past where the old dinosaur tire was, just far enough you can't see it if you make that turn and commit. So you're stuck in that with a stop sign that allows one car at a time. And it gives me no pleasure whatsoever not to support a project that I would love to see in town. And I think it's a great project. I think it's a great building design. I just cannot support it for the traffic issues that it will cause, and I don't think this mitigates them, and I think the traffic study as presented is flawed. And in saying that, I don't think there's any traffic study that I've never seen one yet that was correct. They're all either way off one way or the other. And I would, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for your time, everybody for being here. Right off the bat, I do support this project, so I'll get that out there. We had a 2-hour meeting yesterday on Teams about this, and one of the things with the developer that we talked about was coming here prepared to, and the city, to talk about the traffic issue. Clearly that was going to be the biggest issue. And so what I want to thank the city staff, the developer, is for addressing all of those concerns, having answers to everything. From my perspective, I'm appointed by a city council member. He is elected by his constituents that live in his area within a city, and my job is to take into account the concerns of the people who live in the city. And I think one of those concerns is going to be the traffic. And I think you guys have done a very good job of addressing those concerns. I understand the traffic issue is going to be there, but you've talked about what the future of Yucaipa looks like. You talked about from the city, our city manager, Calamasa city manager, the developer, the engineers, what the future looks like, and I think the future looks bright. When I first moved to Yucaipa in 2003, Oak Glen Road, that overpass was a nightmare. don't know if you guys remember that. We widened that whole overpass. What was it? 1 lane each way, right? And now you look at it, I mean, it can be done. It just takes time. And I would hate to not bring a project in just because, we're concerned that, the traffic is gonna be what it is, especially when we have, community members who live down the street. I agree with you on the gas station, the guy who owns the gas station. Of course he wants a project there, but you live there. And I was hoping to ask you some more questions about what your family, it's okay now, about what your family thought about this, but you live over there and you support it. So I just want to put it out there. The reason I asked the questions I asked is I want that on record. I want the explanation. I want the people who are going to be upset by this, who are going to say, why did we do this? We keep approving convenience stores in this city, and we keep getting asked the same question. Why do we have another convenience store? Why would we have another gas station? People are going to ask those questions, and I think you guys have adequately addressed or answered those questions. So I appreciate it. That's kind of what I got.
Okay, myself, I'd like to thank everyone for this evening. I know it's been a long night, and I appreciate all the good comments. We've had them both directions with the commissioners, and I know it's going to be a very controversial project one way or the other. So, I mean, we're at that point in the evening where I need some sort of a motion. If I could get
I'm ready to make one.
Chris made the motion to approve. Right, Chris?
I make a motion to approve case number 21-138 with the CUP and ARC and with the recommendations of the staff A through D.
And I will second his motion.
And we got a second by Mr. Wolf. Madeline, would you do a roll call for me, please?
Yes, sir. Chair Allgauer,
No.
Vice Chair Markarian,
Yes.
Commissioner Beck,
Yes.
Commissioner Brzee,
Yes.
Commissioner Hicks,
No.
Commissioner Rexstad,
No. Commissioner
Wolf.
Yes.
That's 5-2 if my count's correct.
4-3.
It sounded like 4-3 on the phone, but I
Is
don't
it
know who's
4-3?
awake.
4-3.
Yes.
It's 4-3, motion passed.
All right, with that, Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully ask that I can head back to bed and let you guys have fun with the two remaining items.
I think it's time for you to go to bed.
Thank you, gentlemen. I miss you guys. Be safe and
We're gonna take
job
a
well
short
done
5-minute
again.
break.
Thank you.
No.
Ben, is this, do we got block walls on this project? So I don't have to ask. Block walls? Yes? Yes, I don't have to ask that question? I motion we approve the project before we.
What did I do wrong? You got that look on you, look at it. About as close as you're gonna get, huh? Huh?
Hey.
I think at the end of the day on a project like this, if I lived over there though, and had to use that interchange every day as my primary way in and out, I'd be pissed.
I think what we should do, Aaron, is for you to switch your duty assignment from wherever you work. You can become a traffic director down under that overpass and answer the question, why are we doing this?
So, believe it or not, I thought about asking the question of, okay, now you look at the freeway and we're way backed up, right? Are we gonna have an officer come out and start putting the lights on red?
gonna get to mine or what? Or did I get put on the back burner or what? Oh, yeah, you said 7.
discussion and. Let's start it. All I have to do is unmute themselves. So, okay, I guess our next item is going to be case number 22-047, a conditional use permit to allow for a continued development of 108 residentials. Who's got it?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Algauer. Today I bring before you case number 22-047, a conditional use permit to allow for the continued development of a 108-unit residential detached condominium project on 14.9 acres, and a minor variance request for a reduction of building setbacks to interior lot lines for a total of 6 units, requesting an 11-foot rear yard setback in lieu of the 15-foot required setback, and a 16-foot side yard setback in lieu of the 20-foot setback. Previously approved as case number 16-026, CUP-minor variance, located between 3rd and 4th Streets, approximately 800 feet north of County Line Road. And the applicant is Rich Yucaipa 3. The site is located between 3rd and 4th Street, north of County Line Road, on our RM 10M land use designation. That's our multi-residential land use district with a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet, with frontages along both 3rd and 4th Street. You can see here the site is semi-improved at this point, as this is the continued development. The project history goes back a little while. It was originally approved as case number 5-170 for a 210 condominium project. It was revised in 2009 for 108 condominium units, and the architectural review was done in 2015. The case, as it was nearing its expiration, sought to renew its CUP with case number 16-026, at which point it provided a supplemental mitigative negative declaration. This project was approved, then extended, and is now running out of time, and so they are seeking to renew their conditional use permit. The site plan can be seen here. You can see there's the 108 units kind of well spread out in a condominium style with a clubhouse and a pool. This is the detailed site plan if anyone can make sense of those lines.
No.
A few notable features are that there are 2 main housing types providing either 2,185 square feet to 3,112 square feet of living space. These are 2-story plans with the amenities required by our multifamily standards. Specific site amenities include private yards and common open space with a clubhouse, swimming pool, spa, and 2 tot lots with common area landscaping. The infrastructure, which has already been completed, includes private streets improved to city standards, as well as 2 drainage detention basins to maintain historic drainage flows, and decorative entrances and street-oriented landscaping on 3rd and 4th Street. As I said, a lot of these have already been completed. The interior infrastructure was largely completed with the pads graded. Just, I think only 6 of the units have been constructed at this point. These are the colors and materials that are proposed for these elevations. These are the same as what were previously proposed. Let me take a look at those. Plan A is a 2,185 square foot elevation that provides, actually it's, there was a minor change to this. It's 3 feet shorter than the one that was previously approved, but otherwise is completely identical. The same thing with Plan B. It's a 2,272 square foot elevation with that additional 3-foot shorter total height, but otherwise completely identical elevations to what was previously approved. This is Plan C, which is a 2,763 square foot type structure, and it has, again, the same exact elevation styles. Same with Plan D, which is a 3,112 square foot building. This is the proposed architecture for the clubhouse. It leans into that craftsman style with the stone and the gabled roof. There was another slight change to the project phasing, which includes 10 phases, with phase 1 largely built and conditions of approval that address phasing. The minor change was that they included 4 additional units in the first phase. You can see that highlighted in the purple on the screen there. It's to the left. As I mentioned earlier, there is a minor variance associated with this project. This is the same minor variance that was approved in 2016, with key components of the findings noting that the interior lots, numbers 41, 42, and 43, are adjacent to a paper street that was vacated as a part of this project. This paper street provided 30 additional feet to the neighboring lots that provided additional space for that privacy that would be provided with setbacks on units 41, 42, and 43. Additionally, variances are proposed to perfect the setbacks that were delineated on the previously approved plans. Aside from these minor variances, this project meets all of our development standards. As a part of this project, it is our recommendation that you uphold the previous supplemental mitigated negative declaration that was prepared and adopted in compliance with CEQA in 2016, which determined that all impacts could be mitigated to less than significant impact. As a part of this project, we noticed all of the property owners within 500 square feet. No responses were received as a part of this noticing, but it should be noted that during previous entitlement phases, there were concerns regarding urban water use supply, traffic impacts, drainage impacts along 4th Street, and comments regarding the project design, including a request for a mix of evergreen trees and split-faced walls. It should be noted that through the development of this project, these public comments were addressed. Here are a couple of the site photos. If you squint to the back, you can see some of the existing or built models that were already done, as well as the exterior block walls with some of the landscaping already in place. And so it is staff's recommendation that you approve the conditional use permit, adopt the findings for the conditional use permit and the minor variance, find that the previously adopted supplemental and mitigated negative declaration remains valid and applicable, and direct staff to file a notice of exemption. The applicant is here. I think that he did want to make a presentation. If you guys have any questions for either himself or myself.
Anybody have any questions for staff at this time? There's 2 streets, right? One entrance on exit on 3rd and one on 4th, correct?
That's correct.
Did we do a traffic study on this one?
No traffic study was done as part of this project. It is, as Tricia mentioned, within the RM land use district, which allows for the multifamily designation. And so as part of the project, it is compliant with the traffic projections of that district.
Okay, did the applicant wish to make a?
Good evening, Chairman Algauer. Nice to see you again and your smiley face. Members of the commission, thank you. My name's Dan Haskins. I'm with the Land Engineering Consultants at 650 Avenue K, Calamasa, California. I'm here representing the applicant, Mr. Bo Wu. He's got one of his LLCs named Rich Yucaipa 3, but the project designation is Magnolia Gardens, as we all know it. We've been working with staff since 2015. We worked out and ironed out a lot of the concerns from the adjacent neighbors. And as Christian had mentioned, the conditions are basically the same. Very minor modifications were made. The clubhouse design was refaced with a little bit of an update of the craftsman style. The homes were reduced. We had 10-foot lower ceilings and 10-foot upper second floor ceilings. And so we decided to go 9 on the bottom and then 8 on the top, which would be more standard for the typical 2-story. So that was done as a part of this, recommending approval for that change. Basically, the project as a whole has not changed. The infrastructure is constructed. The landscaping and perimeter street improvements are all constructed. Some of the, I wanted to explain, just nobody's even asking, but some of the questions have come up kind of in the neighborhood. Hey, what's going on with that project? The project was approved. We had a presidential election, and there were some issues with China and U.S., and China locked up their banks. They locked up their money. You couldn't get a dime out of it unless you carried it in a suitcase, flew it to Canada, walked in the forest at night, and brought it into the U.S. Well, Bo, being a Chinaman, China businessman, he had a lot of his funds locked up in there. So that occurred. That got eased up. He was able to get money out. And then COVID hit. And so that shut everything down. And so I'm just wanting to sort of give you a little bit of the brief summary of why the project has been delayed. But it is kicked off now. They just built, they're constructing 6 homes of the last part of the phase 1. And we've just added 4 more of the larger homes on the north perimeter of the project to phase 1 to construct 14 total homes for that. So I think everything's back on track now. So if you guys have any questions, we've read the conditions of approval. We're in agreement with all of those, and we'd appreciate you guys reapproving the project. Today's our expiration date at 11:59. So we would certainly appreciate a reapproval of the project. Thank you so much. I'm here to answer any questions you guys might have.
Do we have any public comments?
I just have a question, and I think I was here.
Any public comment? Any public? Okay. With that, we'll close. I guess we'll close the public hearing.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman, please?
Really? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I was trying to remember this. I was on the planning commission when this was approved in 2016, but I honestly can't remember it. This is market rate. These will be market rate.
Yes.
And are you at liberty to tell us approximate values on these?
Of the homes that are constructed, the models have actually been appraised, and they're roughly $650 to $750. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions?
Nice plan.
Which I guess is cheap now, right? That's a low price for a home?
Toledo, be nice. Okay,
Thank
come
you.
on. Okay, with that, I guess, we move to commissioner unless someone has. Commissioners?
It's a nice project. I mean, that wall.
We could.
Randy, you'd be proud of that wall. I am very proud of it. Safety first.
Well, we could
Make it a motion.
well, we could continue it. I mean, it's.
We're waiting for you, Lloyd.
I do want to clarify as well, for the recommendations for staff, E should actually be direct staff to file a notice of determination on that.
Okay, I didn't hear all that, but I'll make a motion that we approve case number 22-047, conditional use permit, minor variance, and that we approve conditions A through D.
I will second that motion.
And to clarify, A through E with the change of directing staff to file a notice of determination.
Right. I agree with Ben.
We're waiting for Mr. Hicks.
What's
Go ahead. What do you got?
No, we just need yes or no.
We have a second.
Yeah, no, we're waiting for comments.
Beautiful plans, Mr. Haskins. I like your
Oh.
plans.
You gotta take all the fun out of it. Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Yep.
So man, you wanna do roll call again? Go ahead.
Chair Algauer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Markarian, not present. Commissioner Beck,
Yes.
Commissioner Brzee. Commissioner Hicks,
Yes.
Commissioner Rexstad,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
That is 6-0. Motion carries. You got a project. About time you went to work. Okay, our next item on the agenda is number 22-061, the special use permit for architectural review of a 16-foot tall detached garage.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Algauer. Today I bring before you item number 4. It is case number 22-061, a special use permit and architectural review of a 16-foot tall, 600 square foot detached metal garage located on a single-family residential property at 32364 Kentucky Street. The site location is a 0.36 acre parcel located within our RS10M single residential 10,000 square foot minimum lot size land use district. It is surrounded by similar single family residences, and the garage will act to store the applicant's cars, RVs, tools, and to act as a man cave as well. The site plan the site is currently improved with a 1,704 square foot home and a detached 660 square foot barn. The proposed garage is to be 600 square feet and 16 feet tall. The proposed garage fits within all RS10M setbacks and is located behind the main residence. The elevations are shown here. It includes a pitched roof that is 16 feet tall at the peak and approximately 14 feet tall generally. It has a roll-up door that is proposed to be provided along the east elevation of the structure with a man door on the north elevation, with the structure to be painted sandstone with white trim and roof and matching doors. And that's to be painted to match the existing house, which as you can see is yellowish color with white trim here. As a part of this project, we noticed the neighboring properties. Only one response was received that was in favor of this project. So it is staff's recommendation that you review the architectural review design of the proposed garage and adopt the special use permit findings, adopt a categorical exemption, and direct staff to file a notice of exemption.
Okay, with that, anyone have any question for staff? Did the applicant wish to make a statement?
Say yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. With that, we'll close the public hearing and we'll move to the commissioners.
I'll make a motion that we approve case number 22-061, special use permit, and for the architectural review in items A through D.
Lloyd has a second. We'll just do all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 6-0. Sir, we want to thank you for hanging in here this evening. I know it was a long night for you, but thank you. We got a project. Man, we have another meeting this month?
That we do. We will have another meeting in 2 weeks, and then we will have some additional meetings in August as well. So we do have a stream of projects in the horizon. So yeah, should be fun. And I think a few of them will have a number of public comments. So it should be some not so brief meetings coming up, but hopefully it starts cooling off towards the end of the year. So looking forward to seeing you guys more the next couple of months.
Does that mean we're going to be threatened again?
But that's all I got.
Meeting adjourned. Good job, gentlemen. Very good.